She dedicated 20 years to this company, but she was just thrown out. Management thought they could get rid of her without repercussions. They didn't even realize they'd already signed their own verdict. What happened next shocked the entire industry. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos and write, "Where are you watching this video from?" The morning felt different. It wasn't in the air, nor in the light pouring through the blinds of her bedroom window. It was in the weight pressing against her chest as she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Alyssa Williams had been preparing for this moment for weeks, yet now, as it arrived, a quiet sense of inevitability settled in. 20 years at DataCore, and today she would be erased from it like she had never been there. She moved through her routine methodically. The coffee machine hummed as she poured herself a dark roast, no cream, no sugar. The email in her inbox, marked urgent. Meeting at 10 a.m., confirmed what she had already known. There was no explicit mention of termination, but it didn't need to be. She had seen this play out too many times before. The slow erasure of people like her, colleagues who had been quietly sidelined, overlooked, dismissed under the guise of restructuring. She thought about the faces that had disappeared from the office over the last 5 years. Men and women who had worked as hard as she had, only to be replaced by younger, whiter counterparts with half their experience. The company had always cloaked it well. Phrases like shifting priorities and strategic realignment were their weapons of choice. She had lasted longer than most, but deep down, she knew her time was running out the moment she saw the latest round of promotions. She arrived at the office at 9:30, early enough to see the day beginning as if nothing was different. The lobby was bustling, interns rushing between departments, executives striding through with their coffee cups and clipped conversations. She passed by desks where younger engineers sat, their eyes flickering toward her before quickly looking away. They knew. Everyone knew. As she walked toward the glass conference room at the end of the hall, the sensation of being watched prickled along her skin. Conversations hushed as she passed. They weren't even subtle about it. Some of them were expressions of discomfort, others of quiet relief. No one wanted to be in her place. Inside the room, 2 figures waited for her. Cameron Blake, the VP of Engineering, sat with his hands folded neatly on the table, a carefully composed expression on his face. Across from him was Linda Harrison, head of HR, her posture stiff, her eyes calculating. Between them was a single manila folder. Alyssa took her seat without a word. Cameron started speaking first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. He spoke about new directions and exciting opportunities, about how the company was restructuring to adapt to the evolving industry. Alyssa listened, unmoving, as Linda chimed in about how much they valued her contributions and how difficult these decisions were. It was a performance, a carefully choreographed script designed to strip this moment of any emotional weight. The folder slid across the table toward her. Standard severance package. She didn't need to open it to know what was inside. 2 weeks of pay for every year served, 3 months of extended health benefits, a list of career counseling services she would never use. She nodded, picking up the folder but not opening it. Cameron and Linda exchanged glances, clearly surprised by her lack of reaction. They had expected resistance, maybe even anger. After all, she was a 54-year-old black woman being pushed out of the tech industry, a space that had always treated her like an anomaly, a temporary presence that had overstayed its welcome. They had probably rehearsed responses for every possible reaction. outrage, tears, legal threats. But Alyssa didn't give them the satisfaction of any of it. Instead, she simply said, "I understand." A flicker of relief crossed their faces. Cameron nodded, regaining confidence. He reminded her that she would need to return her company-issued laptop, phone, and keycard before Friday. Linda added that her team would be informed later that afternoon. The meeting was ending. It was clear they wanted it to be quick, efficient. They wanted her to disappear as smoothly as possible. Alyssa stood, smoothing her blazer. "Is there anything else?" There was a pause, as if they had expected something more. Linda shook her head. "No, that's all. Thank you for making this professional." Professional? She turned and walked out without another word. The office felt different now. The same hallways, the same desks, the same people, but the shift was palpable. Conversations lowered as she passed, eyes darted away, some offering awkward smiles, others avoiding her completely. They were treating her like a ghost already, like someone who'd already ceased to exist in the company's fabric. She reached her office and closed the door behind her. Her desk was as she had left it that morning, organized, familiar, a reflection of 20 years of work, but none of it belonged to her anymore. She sat down, pulled out her personal phone, and sent a single text message. "It's happening. Friday is my last day." The reply came almost instantly. "Perfect timing. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to finalize details." A slow smile spread across her face. Today was Wednesday. Friday, she would leave Datacorp for the last time. Monday would be fascinating. The last days at Datacorp passed in a blur of quiet exits and sidelong glances. Alyssa moved through the office as if already invisible, her presence acknowledged only in hesitant nods or murmured condolences from those who felt obligated to say something. The younger engineers barely met her eyes. Some were likely relieved, one less senior figure standing in their way. Others seemed genuinely uncomfortable, perhaps realizing what had been taken from her, though none dared to say it aloud. She packed her desk carefully, methodically. Family photos, a few awards, conference badges from the many industry events she had attended, all reminders of a career that had spanned 2 decades. The coffee mug her team had gifted her last Christmas sat on the desk for a long moment before she finally placed it into the box. A meaningless trinket now, though at the time she had believed it to be a sign of appreciation. The email went out that afternoon. A corporate farewell message written in detached, neutral language. It thanked her for her contributions, acknowledged her years of service, and wished her the best in her future endeavors. There was no mention of the projects she had led, the breakthroughs she had contributed to, or the countless late nights spent ensuring that Datacorp's security architecture remained among the best in the industry. By the time the message reached inboxes, the gossip had already spread. Some employees stopped by her office offering brief, uncomfortable goodbyes. Miguel, one of her most trusted engineers, lingered the longest. He looked at her as if trying to find the right words, but in the end he only said, "You deserve better." She had only nodded. When she left the office for the last time, she didn't turn back. That evening, she met with the CEO of BlackRock Cyber at a discreet restaurant across town. Gregory Sullivan was a strategic thinker, a man who had built his company on the idea that true innovation came from those who had been overlooked elsewhere. He had seen what Datacorp had failed to recognize, and, unlike them, he understood the value of securing talent before it was too late. They went over the contract in detail. Everything had been prepared well in advance. A 7-figure signing bonus, an executive position as Chief Technology Officer, equity in BlackRock Cyber, and, most importantly, full control over the licensing of her algorithm. She had been meticulous in protecting her work, ensuring that every modification she had made in her personal time remained legally separate from Datacorp's intellectual property. Gregory slid a folder across the table. "As soon as you sign, the press release goes out Monday morning," he said. "We're making it official." She signed without hesitation. By the time she woke the next morning, the world had already started to shift. The press release from BlackRock Cyber was out, and the industry was taking notice. The headline read, "BlackRock Cyber secures exclusive rights to next-generation security algorithm from former Datacorp executive." Her name was in the first paragraph. By midday, her inbox was flooded with messages. Some congratulatory, others from former colleagues pretending to be happy for her, while undoubtedly scrambling to understand the implications. More than a few were from competitors suddenly interested in discussions they had never considered before. But it was the internal reaction at Datacorp that truly mattered. Miguel had been feeding her updates since the morning. The first wave of emails had hit executive inboxes before the market even opened. The CEO, Cameron Blake, had been caught completely off guard. Within hours, emergency meetings had been scheduled. Legal teams had been pulled in to review her contract, desperate to find a loophole that would allow them to claim ownership of her work. By early afternoon, Miguel sent her another update. Panic mode activated. "They're pulling every project file you ever touched. Some VP is yelling about patents. IT just wheeled in the research servers." She could picture it clearly. Executives pacing, legal counsel scrambling, engineers frantically combing through old code bases, searching for any evidence that could tether her work to the company. But they wouldn't find it. She'd been too careful. Then another message. "Stock is down 7% already. Investors are asking questions." Alyssa leaned back in her chair, watching the industry response unfold in real time. It had taken less than a day for the market to react. By the time the first email from Cameron Blake arrived in her personal inbox, she already knew what it would say. "Alyssa, there appears to be a misunderstanding. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss." She forwarded it to BlackRock Cyber's legal team without responding. By the evening, the industry was abuzz with speculation. Analysts were debating whether Datacorp could survive without her algorithm. BlackRock Cyber's stock was rising, while Datacorp's continued to slide. 3 separate technology publications had requested interviews with her. As she reviewed the growing number of articles, another message from Miguel appeared. "They're freaking out. Victor is losing it. Full damage control mode. Someone just asked in a meeting if they forgot to patent your work." The silence was brutal. She allowed herself a small smile. Monday would be fascinating. By Monday morning, Datacorp was in full crisis mode. The company had spent the entire weekend scrambling to assess the damage, but the reality was unavoidable. The moment BlackRock Cyber's press release had gone live, the industry had taken notice, and now Datacorp was hemorrhaging credibility. Inside their glass-walled headquarters, a hastily called emergency board meeting was already underway. Victor Lawson, the company's CEO, had spent the last 48 hours fielding panicked calls from investors, analysts, and legal teams. He had walked into the office that morning already on edge, but the sight of his general counsel and CFO waiting at his door had confirmed what he feared most. The company's legal team had spent the weekend combing through Alyssa Williams' employment contract, searching for a way to claim ownership of her algorithm. The results had not been promising. Every clause regarding intellectual property development had clear stipulations, Any innovation created on company time, using company resources, belonged to DataCore. But Alyssa had been meticulous. Her patent filings were airtight, with timestamps proving that every critical refinement had been made outside of work hours, on personal equipment, using independent research. By the time Victor entered the conference room, the room was thick with tension. The board members sat in a semicircle, waiting for an explanation. The company's general counsel, Robert Tate, was already flipping through a folder of legal documents, his expression unreadable. Victor barely had time to sit before the questioning began. One of the senior board members, a no-nonsense investor named Philip Anders, leaned forward, tapping his pen against the table. How the hell did this happen? Silence. The legal team shifted uncomfortably. Marjorie Thompson, the head of HR, cleared her throat, but no one spoke. Victor felt the weight of their stares. From what we understand, Philip continued, voice sharp, this algorithm, this proprietary technology that powers our flagship cybersecurity system, is no longer proprietary. And now we're learning that we don't own it, that we never owned it. Another board member spoke up. BlackRock Cyber's announcement made it clear. They're integrating it into their next generation of security products, which means if we continue using it, we're in violation of their patent. Victor turned to Robert, expecting some kind of legal maneuver, a loophole, a way out of this mess. But Robert only shook his head. She covered herself, Robert said. The filings are solid. If we challenge it, we'll lose. The weight of that statement settled over the room. For the first time, Victor saw real panic in the eyes of the board. They weren't thinking about product development. They were thinking about the stock, the investors, the long-term damage. Philip tossed the printed copy of BlackRock's press release onto the table. We've lost 7% of our market value since Friday. That's millions in investor money evaporating overnight. Victor exhaled sharply. What are our options? Robert hesitated before speaking. We license it from BlackRock. The words felt like a slap across the face. The idea of paying Alyssa Williams, after pushing her out of the company, was unthinkable. But no one in the room disagreed. The alternative? Philip asked. Robert's expression darkened. We rebuild, from scratch, a new algorithm. No trace of her code, no trace of her design. Victor knew exactly what that meant. It had taken Alyssa years to refine that system. They didn't have years. We don't have time for that, Marjorie said, voice tight. Clients will leave if they think our security is compromised. They'll go to BlackRock. Another silence stretched across the room. It was Philip who broke it. So, we license, which means we need to talk to her. Victor swallowed the bitterness rising in his throat. By noon, a formal request had been drafted, requesting a discussion with BlackRock Cyber regarding potential licensing terms. Across the city, in a sleek high-rise overlooking the financial district, Alyssa read the email without a flicker of surprise. Miguel had been feeding her updates from inside DataCore all morning. The panic, the emergency meetings, the desperate attempts to find a workaround. She had expected this moment, and she had prepared for it. By now, industry analysts were already speculating on DataCore's next move. Would they fight it? Would they rebuild? Would they try to downplay the situation? But what no one knew yet was that Alyssa and BlackRock had already decided on their response. That afternoon, BlackRock's legal team sent a return message. They were open to discussions, but the terms were firm. DataCore would not only pay for licensing rights, they would pay at 3 times the standard industry rate. And most importantly, They would issue a public statement acknowledging Alyssa Williams as the creator of the algorithm. Victor read the email in his office, fingers curling into fists. The company had spent 20 years pretending people like her were replaceable. Now, for the first time, they would have to admit they were wrong. The morning light filtered through the towering glass windows of BlackRock Cyber's headquarters, casting long shadows across Alyssa's new office. A year ago, she had walked out of DataCore for the last time, her name erased from the company's future. Now, her name was everywhere. She sat at her desk, reviewing the latest quarterly innovation report. 3 new products had launched under her leadership, each built on the foundations of the algorithm she had once been told was just another cog in the corporate machine. The latest iteration of the system had exceeded even her own projections, boosting efficiency by an additional 16% beyond what she had originally envisioned. Clients were flocking to BlackRock Cyber, drawn by the security and reliability that DataCore could no longer promise. A quiet knock at the door drew her attention. Gregory Sullivan stepped in, carrying a sleek black folder in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. He placed them on her desk, along with a bottle of champagne. "Happy anniversary," he said, pouring the glasses. "The board asked me to share the news personally before the public announcement." Alyssa arched an eyebrow, setting down the report. "Good news?" Gregory smiled. "Better than good. As of this morning, BlackRock Cyber has officially surpassed DataCore in market valuation for the first time in company history." She let the words sink in. The company that had once dismissed her as expendable had now fallen behind, no longer the industry leader it had once claimed to be. And BlackRock Cyber, her company now in more ways than one, had taken its place. It had taken time. Even after DataCore had reluctantly agreed to licensing her technology, their decline had only accelerated. Their public acknowledgement of her contribution had come too late to undo the damage. Investors had lost confidence. Their best engineers had defected, and clients had started looking elsewhere for stability. Even those who stayed were wary. They knew that DataCore had built its foundation on a technology it no longer controlled. The company had tried to recover, hiring new engineers to rebuild their infrastructure from scratch. They had promised investors a new proprietary system, a revolutionary replacement for the algorithm they no longer owned. But Alyssa knew better. She had spent 3 years perfecting the original version, and that was with full knowledge of its intricacies. DataCore's new team had none of that insight. The project had stretched from months into a year, delays piling up as the company struggled to deliver on its promises. The cracks had already formed. By the time DataCore's CEO had finally stepped down, there had been little left to salvage. The board had pushed out half the executive team, including Marjorie Thompson and Robert Tate, the very people who had engineered her departure. The new leadership had been forced to reckon with the reality that their only viable path forward was to keep paying BlackRock Cyber for continued use of Alyssa's system. Gregory handed her a sleek white envelope. "This arrived for you this morning." Alyssa unfolded it carefully. The embossed lettering at the top bore the name of one of the most prestigious conferences in the industry. It was an invitation. Keynote speaker, Dr. Alyssa Williams. Topic: Owning Your Intellectual Value, How Proper Documentation Changed an Industry. She traced her fingers over the words. Last year, she had attended this same conference as part of the DataCore delegation, sitting in the back as Victor Lawson had stood on the stage, taking credit for her work. This time, she would be the one at the podium. Gregory watched her, amusement flickering in his eyes. You know, you've become something of an icon. Alyssa shook her head with a smile. It was never about revenge. It was about recognition. She raised her glass, clinking it lightly against his. To proper recognition, Gregory said. The sun streamed through the windows as she took a slow sip of champagne. For the first time in her career, she wasn't just another name buried in a footnote. She was exactly where she had always belonged. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Watch more videos to stay updated. Share this video with others.